Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of HITalks Podcast. I'm your host, Syed. This is a podcast where we talk to business leaders, industry experts, and thought leaders about their understanding their success stories to help you craft yours. Today, we have fantastic guests with us, Bilal Masood, manager at Connor Groups, where he leads complex NetSuite implementations and mentors the next generation of consultants. His career began with humble roots, tutoring middle school students, and evolved into various roles in IT consulting to where he is at today. His story is testament of hard work, resilience, and relentless pursuit of excellence. Thank you, Bilal, for joining us. How are you doing today?
Anytime. Thanks for having me. I'm doing well. Day's going well. How about you?
It's going well. Slow today, but I'm not complaining. How about yours?
Yeah, busy, I'd say. But that's normal in the consulting realm. Wrapping up a lot of sessions, but also trying to make sure things go on as planned for your project plans. But other than that, everything's good. Can't complain.
Amazing, amazing. Let's dive into your introduction and a little bit of background I wanted to ask you. So, I saw your LinkedIn and did some research on your story. You started off as an IT intern back in the day, and now you're a manager at Connor. What have been your key moments in your or decision that has shaped the path for you today?
Yeah, that's a great question. Key moments. So, from my first internship to now, there's definitely a lot of different job experiences that helped me land where I am. I'd say key moments for me were when I kind of got my first introduction to software software development.
Yeah.
I think that, while I was in college, I did a lot of programming and I was doing software development for a lot of companies. It wasn't something I knew a lot about, but I learned a lot through my professors at the university I attended, University of Houston, and decided to take classes I was not familiar with. So I would say if it wasn't for those classes, I would have never jumped into the technology realm. So definitely a lot of key moments just getting myself out of my comfort zone from there. And then after that, I'd say, after I've taken my first few classes, did some projects and hands-on throughout my career. My first internship was where you mentioned I was an IT intern, was at an energy infrastructure company. And I did a lot of database development, etc. So I got to apply some of what I learned throughout my college career and really see how this works in like a corporate and an actual real world, right? I got to work on real projects and make impacts with executives and other consultants and SMEs. And I think that was kind of my first introduction to, well, this is how the reality of projects work versus conceptual. I think that's definitely another key moment. But, after doing that internship for those 3 months I did in the summer, my third year, it wasn't until a friend introduced me to ERP Consulting, which was different than what I did because I was in software development.
Yeah.
And he mentioned that, you had a lot of tenacity and skills to do that. It requires a lot of consulting, business analysis, thinking through ahead versus in the moment. And I think that was also a key moment for me. If it wasn't for that one friend, I would have never thought about going into the ERP industry. He told me a lot about what he did at NetSuite at the time, and that's what kind of landed. And so as a result, I was able to apply to NetSuite. They had an entry-level opening for a position where they take people who just recently graduated college and teach you hands-on consulting and ERP development. And so I think that was also very, very essential for my development growth. Yeah.
And what about how did you get into NetSuite? Is as an ERP, you probably were debating different types. Was your friend in NetSuite and he just got you into
Yeah, well, he kind of introduced me to this was pre-acquisition to Oracle, and so at the time I wasn't entirely sure what NetSuite was. I'm sure a lot of people didn't. This is back 2016. But when you're looking for jobs, your mindset is you want to find any type of job to keep you busy, even if it's not somewhere where you want to be. So I was like, you know what, I'll apply here and let's just see what happens. Let's roll the dice type situation. But, after a few rounds of interviews, I learned more and more every time about the industry and what it does. And then I started getting interested, especially when they flew me to the last round in Chicago. I got to meet some of their business leaders who really spoke a lot highly about where they envisioned their future for that software. And that I think that's what sold me, to be honest, and made me take the leap, joining them as an associate consultant at the time. So
I see. And it's the friend of yours, he deserves a lot of credit, but also, I see a lot of consultant who early stages, they don't know where to go and stuff. So I guess having a good mentorship at the young age helps you quite a lot. What about particularly any challenges, when even in just because you got to consulting after a few pivots in your career, what were some challenges that you were facing?
Yeah,
Obviously,
yeah,
personally
definitely.
speaking, and then when you lead a project, when you get into consulting, how do you overcome those type of challenges and difficulties to make sure you do well in your role?
I would say, yeah, that's a great question. When I was a developer, right, before I went to the ERP Consulting, a lot of the work is very internal and offline. You're doing, you're building codes, programming, and then you're sending it for review and testing and development. And so a lot of it was not client facing that I was before. Like you're working within the same team every time.
Yeah.
So you're not very much used to the component of how you need to present this, more of like developing things for the end user. But in consulting, that was a very, very big change in my career because you're not just responsible for doing all those things as a development perspective, but you're also responsible for translating that to how the client need to see it, how it's relevant for their business. So I'd say that was challenge number one, determining how to best develop a solution and think about how the client should do this, even though you don't have industry experience. I'll tell you that was a huge challenge because you come in as an associate at the time, right? You're working with all these great solution architects, subject matter experts, which have years of experience, but you're the person who is playing catch up, right? You're learning as you develop. And so I think that was one of my biggest challenges I had at the beginning is just how to speak their language, but more importantly, how to keep yourself polished while doing it. I'll say that was definitely a big challenge for
And
me.
that must be tricky too, because you don't want to look sort of like a newbie because they're giving you a large scale project, and they
Yes.
want they want people who know what they're doing.
Yes. Fortunately, I had a lot of great leaders, going back to
Yeah,
mentorship. A lot of my roots come from good leaders and mentors that I had. And that's kind of what's made me a better leader as well, right? Throughout this phase. Folks who've taken a chance really took their time to teach me. And if it wasn't for that, I think I learned the conceptual hands-on pretty quickly. But if it wasn't for those leaders, there's so many I can think of just top of mind, I wouldn't be where I am today. So a lot of that development comes from there. They teach you how to learn the lessons. They do dry runs with you. You practice with them before you get on a call with the client. And it helps you. And having those mentors adds like a good comfort layer while you do these things. So far,
yeah, no, that's really important, and a lot of people struggle with that because it requires you to put your ego at the door and kind
yep,
of like learn from the scratch.
that's right.
What about sometimes you probably get under pressure and responsibility that comes with now, I assume, in your current role and what you have done previously in more senior roles, the pressure you feel to deliver and all that stuff. How do you manage that? What are some tips and tricks for people who are
Yeah,
listening, consultants who are listening? What can they do to make sure they
yeah,
deliver successfully?
yeah. I always think, proactivity is key here, right? But even then, it's difficult to be proactive, right? Because there's only the biggest things that I've learned throughout doing many, many projects is that the more proactive you can be, the less risks will get involved. That means the more you can think about activities and deliverables to get completed beforehand will help you greatly. But more importantly, I think the other thing is just communication. Like when you're under pressure and you have tight deadlines, typically you're working with multiple project members, you're working with a project manager, right? And you're one person who's like a cog in a wheel. That means if you don't get certain things done and tasks, then other things won't get done. So communication, strong communication will really, really help counteract that. If you think you're about to slip on a deadline or a project or you're struggling, it is better to let the key members or stakeholders know now versus later because you don't want those tasks to get delayed, right? I think if you have strong communication and good proactiveness, that'll both combined together are a strong, strong skill to have. And that's what's helped me develop myself further. And it sounds like such a simple thing to do, but it really
It's not.
it really isn't. It takes years and months of practice and development and following and observing good leaders and how they do it is what I'd say.
And a lot of these things sound cliche, but it's just hard to do. It's just
Yes, yes. Sometimes I still struggle with myself, but I've learned along the way that if I don't do it, then you're setting yourself up for failure. So it's just you gotta be open on
100%.
these fronts.
And I was reading, I mean, when I was researching on your, what you have done in your career, I think overall, if you look, you have probably worked on 100 plus NetSuite implementations over the
Mhm.
course of your career. Given all that, what you have done, what are some critical factors you think contribute to successful projects? You know how they say, like, I think McKinsey's report or something like 80% of transformation projects, some crazy number like that, don't quote me on it, but it's a pretty significant number that for projects don't get through, like they fail for companies. So given your expertise, like what are some things that you can share that, making sure that you've successfully delivered those projects in digital transformation space?
It's a great question. I've been through implementations like what you described that have just not gone well, have delayed months, even years. But I've had implementations that have gone well. And what I've noticed between the two distinctions is the following. I think number one is having committed team members, not from both the implementation team, but the client side equally as well. I think a lot of folks tend to forget that it's not just one team that has to be committed, but both have to be, right? And so when one isn't committed and is not following through, that'll easily slip the timeline. So when commitment breaks down into making sure you have team members that can take on tasks, that can delegate well, that can be accountable to get things done, right? Because ultimately that's what the backbone of implementations, other than just the product, is really that. Like you can have a product, but it will not go successful without the people actually managing the time, budget, and scope of that implementation. And having committed team members is the very first thing. So usually in any sales deal, those are the things you outline in like a deck or present and say, this is what the rough hours would look like if you decided to do the implementation. And that's very important to factor in your day-to-day job, right? Because you're doing these clients on the client side, they're doing these implementations in addition to the day job. For you, this is your only job, is to implement, right? So for you are 100% hands-on on the delivery team, but you have to remember the client has to make the time as well. So that's one. The second thing I'd say is knowing what's in the scope of work and then knowing the product as best as you can. So, before when you sign an engagement with a client or a potential client, like a prospective client, and you're about to sell something, really knowing everything you're about to sell is key. The minute you don't know it, you're going to lose confidence, not just the client, but yourself, right? Because that's what makes it difficult. I've been in so many deals and so many implementations where I work with consultants who just unfortunately say one thing, but then when it comes to actually demonstrating, you don't see it. So the way I counteract that is I have internal meetings with the entire team. I go through what skill sets each person knows and what is it that they want to grow in. That helps me determine, do we have the necessary skills to execute this scope of work, or do we need to find other resources? So this is where a lot of resourcing, scheduling, and skill set matrix becomes really, really useful so far, I would say.
Yeah, no, I can imagine, because a lot of times what I've seen in the industry is like a salesperson or someone in sales team will sell like the whole dream, and then it goes to actually doing the groundwork, and they're like, hey, we don't even have a capability of to do this.
Yeah, exactly. So, right.
That's really, and then you get the initial sale and stuff, but your reputation in the market is very small, niche, tight community. The word spread around, and sooner or later you're just known for not delivering.
I agree. Knowing what you're like, if you're gonna sell something, you better know it like the back of your head, right? Like, because that's the only way you can commit to what you put on paper, right?
And at least have a team who can deliver if you can.
Or have a team that can deliver for you. Yes, you're absolutely right.
So you touched on mentorship a little bit. I want to go a little bit deeper in that component. So just let's reverse the scenario. So people who have mentored you to what you have become today, like what leadership style was effective, that helped you? Because a lot of mentors, the leadership styles are not really great, and the mentee is not really learning. Why did you learn from these mentors? What were the key leadership qualities that you felt like these are really good, and I should probably pass it on to whoever I'm teaching next to bring them to my level?
I've learned a lot of great leadership styles, and then you kind of figure out what works for you. So it's a bit of a blend. So I'll tell you what's worked for me. That's a great question. Great leaders and mentors that I've had the fortunate opportunity to work over my career here all possessed a few things, such as they all were very communicative. I mean, I mentioned that before, right? Folks that will voice their concerns, their opinions, give you good feedback, right? I mean, that's important as to any development. So that's one thing I can say, right, on that communication front. I think the second is they understand that the vision for where you're going to go, right? So, a lot of folks say, well, I can be a mentor, I can teach this person thing, but then actually being there and seeing the vision, sometimes I feel like it gets blurred. Not understanding where this person is going to go can get blurred. So let me explain what I mean by that. Like, a lot of good mentors I work with understand that the time and investment they put with you up front is going to have is really going to pay off in the long run, whether they work with you or not. So the good leaders I had, the way they would invest in me is by giving me deliverables to do on projects, the way that they would take the time to teach me certain tips and skills. They would put me on calls with them and then help me lead certain aspects, even if be there to support me. And more importantly, even if I fail, they don't judge me for the mistakes, but more of they help me improve, right? And these are all such simple acts, but they make such a big difference in the long run, I would say. So that's the second aspect. And then the last aspect is good leaders will always find you opportunities, right?
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is the ones that I've worked with have always found a way to include me in their upcoming deal or project, or they found a way to, or they worked with me with other good leaders to help me get there on their projects. They wouldn't just put me on a bench for a while. They'd actually actively take the time to think about you as they're also implementing their day-to-day job. Because good leaders can do their job very well, but what makes a good leader different from others is when they can also make the second person also help and improve and do well in their job. That just shows that they can really develop someone and curve their career over the course of their history, for sure.
No, that's some great points. And if you switch the roles, let's say that now you're mentoring new consultants that are coming up, and common challenges now are completely different than when you were in the game of learning and, kind of like being a trainee. What do you see, like how are they struggling in what areas, especially the new ones or the ones who are up and coming, and how can they overcome these? For example, AI is a big thing. Is that bothering them anyway? Like when you were doing such thing, there was no such thing. I mean, there was artificial intelligence, but not to this level where every ERP is incorporating it within the tool, and it might be changing the way these guys learn the tool now. So any of these challenges or similar challenges that you guys are facing at this moment when you mentored them, and how can they overcome, if any?
I think the challenges that I see for any new resources that you're mentoring is, I mean, and I'm sure you know this, is a lot of the work, especially the ERP industry, is remote these days.
Yeah,
and so
that's the big one.
And so, when I started my career, this was 2017. Obviously, this was before remote started becoming more popular in demand. So I felt that being in the office, networking, and all those things played a huge part in developing myself, getting to know people, and building relationships. I feel like for newer consultants, especially those that are coming right out of college into all these big companies, they're really, really promoting fully remote roles, which has its advantages. I understand. But I think for a new person who has not had extensive external experience has found it extremely difficult. So a lot of the mentees I work with these days are all in that situation. They're all across the US that I talk to. The common theme I'm finding is they're struggling to really communicate, learning the product, trying to figure out and work more hands-on with you because they understand and want to be respectful of your schedule. So I'd say that's one area for sure. So that's one big difference that I had, right? And so the way I try to counteract that is to have just check-ins with them, sometimes daily, sometimes multiple times in a week. But there's just only so much you can do, right? Yeah, it's not the same. It's not the same as having someone right next to you and be like, hey, can you walk me through this real quick? And, right then and there, you resolve so much time from being with.
That's so true, because even personally speaking, I'm facing the same hurdle. Before COVID and all that, it was easier to mentor the team, train them on certain aspect, get the results. I think that's the downside of remote. Maybe we need to use different strategy, but after remote, it's so hard because you don't know, like, I don't know, it's just something different for having someone in person and next to you and doing things. I guess it's more natural.
I couldn't agree more. AI impacts, I would say AI has definitely been helping.
Yeah.
Like all these chat features and whatnot. I mean, I think it's helped in a way where you learn product, find resources quicker, get quick answers. So I think it's been, very an advantage for people so far. Fortunately, I've not seen how big of an impact it is yet on the development of people. So if anything, it's helped and made it easier to find resources and training that you need to look through things so far. But AI, and I could be totally wrong about this, but at the moment, I will say you definitely need consultants and hands-on. I don't think it can completely repeat someone with industry experience as of yet, but who knows what will happen 5 years from now, right?
I mean, I always ask this question, but I think for especially in ERP consulting, it's really hard to see AI replacing the jobs or whatnot. Like, it's just too many things that go on, and it's also the cost of messing up is too high. So you need some sort of human intervention.
You need a human interaction,
or else AI gonna piss off a lot of people. But in terms of personal growth and your own daily habits and routine, like what are some things that you do to ensure your best version professionally, and you're kind of successfully growing your career over time? Anything that you can share that you incorporate in your routine or personal habit? Because and at the end of the day, that's who we are. Habits, small habits that become big, and then either you become successful or you don't. So anything that you do in particular, or anything that you want to share that keeps you going, and all that
I'm
stuff.
sure these are common themes with a lot of folks you interviewed, but I will say what's worked for me very well is, before I start my day, go through just checklists and tasks, things that I can commit to getting done within, said timelines. So I feel like before, when I first started, I'd just get right into a meeting without thinking about, what's going on beforehand. So having that first hour and a half of my day, and just being by myself focused on these tasks, really, really helps me set the foundation layer for things. And things such as following up on emails you're behind on, or re-looking at timelines and budget, walking it through, like, is so, so important. So I think I always make a good habit of doing that, even if it's 30 minutes of the start of my day before I talk to anyone or respond to any texts or messages. The second day is before I close my day. Generally like to make sure I knock all the administrative parts of the job out, because those get overlooked so quickly. Things like putting in your timesheets and making sure you respond to emails, is because even though they're routine tasks, they make a huge difference in the professional world, right? Because a large part of your job is not just communicating and talking verbally, but also virtually, right? And the way you do that is through emails and through texts and through messages, etc., right? You want to make sure you get all that in front face before anything. And I think that's a lot of that's bleeds into my personal life too. With my wife and my family, I try to make sure I get to calling the person I need to call throughout the day, or also, talk to my wife, check in with her and make sure she's good, or make sure we're on time with certain things that we're committed to coming up for the weekend, things like that. So
Yeah,
a lot of
no,
my personal life too.
no, I completely resonate with that, because back in the day it was more like, just go with the flow and get your day
Yeah,
started. But
that was
then
very
this stress builds up, and you want your quiet time just to just see how, plan out everything and then go about it. I know time is of the essence. I'm gonna ask you two
sure.
more questions, then we'll wrap it up. One is
Sure.
like, what piece of advice would you give to someone aspiring to follow, your footsteps in consulting and NetSuite space?
Yes, that's a great question. I would say the very first thing is to show your interest and network, right? Like, anyone with any product in ERP started not knowing nothing, right? Like, I'm a prime example. I had no idea what NetSuite was 7 years ago, but someone took a chance on me and said, hey, you have some sort of development experience. Let's see if you can apply here. If you have an interest, network with people, build with them. Don't be afraid to reach out and just show your interest, because if you don't do that, no one will ever know what to do. So that's number one, right? So I guess part of that, what I'm trying to say is network, and don't be afraid to always do that. I know it's a very cliche thing, but it's so true. It really does help. That's how half of my successes come from just building experience, networking with consultants, subject matter experts, and leaders on different teams in order to help me progress my career. The second thing I would say is become hands-on and learn the product, right? Although networking is key, I would say learning the product is equally important, especially if you're doing NetSuite or Oracle, whichever product. You want to make sure you take advantage of all the certifications, you take advantage of all the free resources and tools that's going to help you master that product learning, because that's going to be important for when you consult and grow your career. And it's also going to help you determine what do you like about the product. Like, NetSuite, for example, has modules for wholesale distribution, manufacturing, retail, right? It's endless. You'll never learn the entire product, but if you start somewhere and learn the core things, that's going to really help you determine what you'd like to specialize later on, as well. Like, when I became a NetSuite expert, I know a lot about the services and software modules, but what I don't know so much about is like the nonprofit modules and et cetera, right? But I wouldn't have learned those things if I didn't get the opportunity from networking, but then two, actually taking advantage of those skills to learn them, right? So far.
These are some great tips. I mean, you were saying it's cliche, but I'm in this fairly for 7 years now, hiring, recruiting, and all that. A lot of people just miss out on these simple things.
Yeah.
And these simple things that they miss out on, and then things don't go right way. Any mantra or philosophy that you live by, would you like to share with us, that keeps you, just overall big picture in life and career?
Yeah. I'm not sure if I have an exact quote, but the way I always think about it is, especially through the difficult times, is be your best self. I mean, it's such a simple thing, right? But it means, when I say be your best self, that means come to work every day with knowing that you're here to resolve actions, and not to take things lightly, but also just putting 100% of your best self in. And that's hard to do sometimes, especially when you have personal obligations and challenges in your life that bleeds into work. That's difficult. But I think that being your best self means that you are trying, even if you're not 100% there, and you are showing and committing to certain things you can get done. And that's helped me with calls I've had with customers. That's helped me internally as a person, and also self-development, really, so far. It's funny, I didn't know what that really meant very early in my career. Nowadays, when I start my workday, I think about like, okay, my goal is to get these 7 or 10 or things done, but and I'm gonna do this by the end of the day. But if I don't get it, I know that I've attempted, and here's what I've done to show as a result, for my performance. 5, 6 o'clock, when I've gone through some difficult calls, I look back at all the things that I've achieved, and I'm like, you know what? That wouldn't have gone any other way, because I knew that I put in what I practiced, what I prepped, and professionally developed myself with. So that's the best thing I can say.
Yeah, no, it's funny because a lot of these quotes, and later on in your life, this you start thinking, oh, that makes sense. Before, it just sounds so simple and cliche.
Yeah.
Just, yeah, no, I agree with you because we're here for not too long, so might as well have the best potential version of ourselves and enjoy the life. Well, thank you so much, Bilal. I know I took busy time of your schedule, and I really appreciate, you took out the time you've given us. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show, and to our listeners, if you'd like to hear more from Bilal, please follow his LinkedIn. I'll put the link below. And until next time, keep striving for success and crafting your unique story. Take care.
Take care. Thank you for the opportunity. It was really, really a great time talking with you. I enjoyed it. I think it's always good to look back and reflect. That's a big part of developing yourself as a leader or consultant, regardless of what industry you're in. So thank you for taking the time to interview, and I really enjoyed this. Take care.
Thank you, Bilal. Thank you.